we're off the grid. We don't need it. I mean, our dream for years has been to come up with a model that doesn't require all of the shenanigans and the monopoly power that comes with owning a market the way they do. We don't care anymore. It's a lovely feeling. Drop it in the parking lot. By the end of the day, you flip the switch and it's charging cars.
All right, well, Jesse, you're going to be really excited to talk to this guy. This is Rob Adams. He's the COO at Solaflect Energy. I got a chance to hang out with him the other day and talk, and I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Rob, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be with you guys. Love it.
I think we should start off with what's behind him there. This is the product they're making. Rob, maybe you can explain what that is and how it works.
Sure, absolutely. What we've done in the course of the last year and a half is adopt something we started installing 10, 11, 12 years ago, which is a tracker that follows the sun all day. And traditionally, it's been up here in Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, out in people's fields and yards, following the sun all day, creating 40% more power than something on a fixed surface. And as we noodled on this almost 2 years ago, like, what's the next big challenge coming? It was, it hit us real quickly that this whole electric vehicle wave is sorely behind as far as infrastructure to support it. We thought, hey, wait a minute, we actually have a solution here that, if adopted to put sunshine directly into EV batteries, could be a real game changer. So what we've designed is, it's a working title now. You guys were funny joking about it, a mouthful a month ago or so when you referred to it, but we're calling it a working title, a solar EV charger. It'll have a zippy name at some point, but for now it's perfectly functional. It says what it is. And this sits in a parking lot on a 6-ton concrete precast foundation. And the array above, which right now is a 6.4 kilowatt array, follows the sun all day and generates roughly 10, maybe even as much as 11,000 kilowatt hours of power in the Northeast, but more like 15,000 kilowatt hours, in the Southwest, of power that goes directly into EVs. And that translates into, over 1 million miles of charge over the course of its expected 25-year life. The solar panels themselves are warranted for 25 years. So it's a pretty robust machine. We have 45 million hours in the field so far in the last decade, so we know it works. And so it's a power plant sitting right there in the parking lot, putting sunshine directly into EV batteries.
So I think that a lot of people are used to seeing EV chargers, and I think that we kind of, I don't want to say we take them for granted, but we pull up to them, we plug in, and we get our charge, and we go about our business. How does your design differ from a typical EV charger?
I think the key point to make right off the bat is that this isn't about speed. I think, I'll just let that hang in the air. From wherever it initiated, this whole conversation about speed being the most critical thing. If I don't have high speed charging, well, it doesn't work. Well, the truth is we sip at charging. I drive a VW ID4, and some of the national data says the average charge cycle is like 10 kilowatt hours of charge. That's like an hour and a half on a level 2 charger, or about $5 if I went to the gas station. Nobody puts $5 in his gas tank, right? But you do with EVs. So we're not about speed, right? We're about, over the long run, getting everything that you need. So this is providing essentially level 2 charging as far as speed goes. And we know level 2 is a range, but it depends on what's plugged in. If you have 4 cars plugged in, it'll be slower. If you have 1 plugged in, it'll be faster, since it's dynamically sharing power between 4 cars.
But I mean, isn't it more complicated to have to put a big solar array that tracks the sun and stuff? And wouldn't it just be better to just kind of hook into some power somewhere and have an EV charger?
Sure. That's certainly one way to think about it, right? I think the way we look at this is an enormous problem that will be solved in lots and lots of different ways. Not for a moment are we suggesting this takes the place of grid-tied charging. We need that. There are times when we need to get exactly what we expect. We produce something that's putting 100% green, truly green, clean energy into vehicles. There's no grid involved. I mean, this sits in the parking lot. There's no digging. There's no utility involvement, nothing, right? So this is sunshine straight in the tank. And our primary target market, as you might understand, is the workplace charging environment, right? You drive to work, the car sits there all day long for 8 hours, you drive home. Well, it's not doing anything while it's sitting in the parking lot. So why not plug it into the sun? And, in the course of an average day, you're getting everything you need for your commute plus some. So you're topping off, consistently, throughout the work year.
Wait, so you said that it didn't have to plug into the grid. And I think that most people, when they hear EV charger, they're thinking about trenching and conduit and
Permits.
and a main panel somewhere and
my panel's not big enough.
and an operations manager who's going, do you want to run the building or do you want to charge everybody's cars? Because I've run into this before. I worked in an office, and the CEO is very pro EV. He drove a Tesla. He had a Roadster. I was like, oh, well, this is going to be easy. And I said, oh, we should get EV charging to charge my Leaf, because I had 70 miles of range in the winter. And I was like, please, now I can go to the mall before I go home. And he said, sure, absolutely, let's get some chargers in. And I remember I went to my I called up Tesla, and they said, we'll give you free chargers. I was like, this is a shoo-in. This is a layup. And then I was like, great, I'll talk to the guy who's going to install them. And he said, no, we just put a whole bunch of new equipment in the area, and we don't have enough power for this. And I said, well, it's whatever, you just more power, right? And he said, no, not really. We'd have to upgrade our panel. We'd have to talk to National Grid. They'd have to run a new line. We'd have to shut off the building for 3 days while they installed the new line. We'd have to do all this stuff, and then we'd have to trench out to the thing and put in conduit. And then we're not in compliance with the ADA anymore, because we'd have to take over some of our handicap parking spaces, and there's be all these problems. And I was going like, oh, but I want EV chargers. So what you're saying is,
you should have called.
I know.
You should have called Rob.
So I just want to. That was like my own little personal nightmare, because I really wanted EV charging, and it was so hard to do because you needed all of this infrastructure that's invisible, right? It's invisible when you install a normal charger. Everything's underground. There's maybe some ugly looking boxes somewhere, but there isn't. Nobody talks about, generally, unless you get into the installation, how difficult some EV installations are. I want to take this entire story, and then I want to apply it to you. So if I had known, and if my company had been interested, what we could have done was, in the back parking lot, it wouldn't have been any of the prime spots, and there wouldn't have been any kind of classist debate among my fellow employees. We could have, in the back parking lot, had a solar tracker, which would have been charging up our cars during the day using 100% solar energy, no grid tie, no trenching, no conduit, no worrying about my operations manager. It would have just sat in the parking lot, quietly working away, charging up all of our stuff. That is what you are making.
Yeah. So Jesse, first off, I'd only correct you on one thing. You said most people would think that EV charging is grid tied. Well, no, 100% of people think it's grid. To be clear, right?
Yes.
Because this doesn't really exist, right? Second, that whatever it was 2-minute little speech you made is exactly what I would have said. So I'm going to spare you like reiterating and repeating what you said. Seriously, that's you painted the picture. I mean, it's an incredibly complex and challenging exercise. All of those pieces are not just time consuming, right? But, and by the way, the delay and all that goes into it often just knocks it off kilter completely, so it never happens.
And I want to say also, I wouldn't, if I hadn't experienced it, it would be a lot harder for me to believe it if somebody like you, who knew all of this, told me. Right? Because I would have just gone, well, it's just, you're not trying hard enough, and stuff like that. Because I think a lot of people really do feel that way. And that's why I want to bring it from my perspective, which is there is a lot of steps involved. And typically, in the case of a company, a lot of times you won't have the CEO on board, and it's just going to be a couple people who really do want charging at the company, and it won't really go anywhere, mainly just because it's this is a lot of work. We're trying to do a business here, and you want to. It never seems to. It would. I mean, to me, it's a lot harder for it to pan out.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is not perceived as mission critical. If I'm talking to a hospital, they're about patient care. If I'm talking to a school, they're about let's educate the kids. This is way off on the side. The noise is growing, mind you, right? There's a lot of employee inquiry and getting a little more heated. But it doesn't mean that it's going to happen anytime soon. So forget for a moment all the complexity involved. There's cost. So now it's a capital issue, right? This is not, and that's another thing we'll talk about in a minute that we've, I think, solved in a pretty creative way. But that amount of cash that, if I've got capital decisions to make, am I going to do that or the upgrade to the thing that's going to help the patient experience, the educator, you name it? Well, it's tough for this to rise to the top, right? And yet we have this massive hole, this enormous delta between the rapid growth in EVs, the need for charging, and the infrastructure to support it. So it's a real mess. It's only widening daily, right?
You said a number early on, which I think might have gone over the heads of most people. You said that your product makes 40% more power than if we just put a bunch of solar panels on a stationary, canopy. And I think that number also would have gone over my head if it hadn't been for the fact that Jesse and I have been doing a lot of solar projects lately. And when I heard this about your company, I'm like, wait, this same panel, like this one right here, I could get 40% more power out of. That's incredible, because normally you have to pay a lot more money to get a more efficient panel. So hang on. How do you get 40% more sun just by moving your tracker around?
Yeah, it's a great question. So is that simple physics? I think you'd call it that. But if the sun is shining directly at the panel, right, I'm optimizing my production, right? If the sun is hitting the panel at any angle, let alone like it rises in the east behind the panel, it's going to make zero, right? So the curve, right, for a rooftop or a fixed panel, solar installation is a bell curve with a pretty steep top, and then it goes down fast, right? The curve for a tracker, the sun rises in the east, comes over the tree line, it goes to full power pretty quickly. And then it stays that way all the way across the top all day long, and it waits till the very end of the day when the sun goes down behind the western tree line and it drops. So now you picked up the shoulders of the day. There's your 40%. And on top of that, and we get to snow at some point. We do still see snow, much less than I'd like living in Vermont, but snow's a real thing. And full well, you see plenty of rooftops after a snow that could sit there for days, sometimes even weeks if the right crust forms, it freezes, right? And you're losing, the best days to make solar energy are those cold, crisp bluebird days in February right after a snowfall.
You're talking about my house.
No humidity, right? No particulate matter in the air. So we're maximizing production, not if it's covered with snow, right? So that's a big deal, right? It's an emotional thing we hear about all the time. This thing sheds snow right away, sleeps vertical at night, and is very steep during the day during the winter because the sun is so low in the sky. So gravity does a wonderful job. Thank you, Mother Nature. So anyway, all those kind of combine to be a real 40% more number. I think that the way I'd summarize it, which is a helpful way we think about it, is we're generating clean energy while conserving real estate, right? So, what we're able to do with this 116 panel tracker over the exact same footprint as 4 vehicles is produce enough power for them to not only commute all year long, but probably double that amount. So there's no more, space usage, right? So that's not a small piece. If you did a canopy, like a fixed canopy, you're going to need 40% more panels to do the same job. That's another way to think about it, right? So 16 panels on a tracker is 23, 24 on a perfectly south-facing surface.
And let's talk about that for a minute. Perfectly south-facing surface. You can't always get what you want when it comes to the physical world. I mean, the thing that I've heard, and the reason why most people don't do tracking is because it's complicated. And, if you're doing it on your roof, you just go, well, you just put more solar panels, and you can put 40% more solar panels, and you don't have to worry about the complexity and the cost of making a tracker. And so I guess that would be my next question is, it's great that you could generate 40% more electricity, but what is the cost of that in having to make a solar tracker?
Sure. I guess the short answer is just a little less than 40%. Right. I mean, so yeah, look, at the end of the day, we're all peddling electrons, right? It's like air or water. I mean, it's a commodity. So you can't go sell it at a big premium unless it's strawberries down at Whole Foods, and you might be willing to pay that premium because it's better food for your family, right? So there's an argument there. This is clean energy. This is premium stuff, right? So hold that thought for a second. But our experience has been it's very much on par with the price of putting something on a fixed surface. And we're a one-trick pony. For 15, 16 years now, all we've done is focus on tightening the engineering around an ever more robust tracker that actually, 45 million machine hours is a lot. So we've made sure that the darn thing works. It has to. 45% of people who buy these things, did so because their friends liked it and told them. So we like that number.
Now, you've got competitors, though. There's other people, I think, that are doing a similar, like tracking the sun and with some kind of canopy in a parking lot with cars that park underneath it and charge from it. So what makes you different than any of them?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. There really is one player out there on the West Coast that is doing this. So the fundamental differences are, one, we're a fully dual axis tracking solution, meaning it is starting vertical in the morning when the sun is down below that horizon, and it's following it every 60 seconds or so all day long.
Can you explain dual access, though? Because I think a lot of people watching, I just think like one plane, but you're talking two?
So single axis tracking is what you see in the huge fields out west, right? So it's this long axle, half a mile long with panels, and they just move in one axis, meaning up and down in the course of the day, right? The second axis, if you will, is sideways. So what we're doing is moving up and sideways every 60 seconds and then down and sideways. So it's programmed to understand where the sun is on any day of the year, from any point on the face of the earth. So it is accurately following us. It's not looking at the sun per se. It just knows it's there because of the algorithm, right? So that dual axis is a full 40%. If you did single axis, that's 20%. So the other player in this world is a single axis tracker up and down, but it's not going from here to here. Right on June 21st at high noon, it's straight up, right? We're tabletop flat. And at 6 a.m, it's here. We're going the full up and down and the full left and right, right? So that 40% bump is a real number with millions of data points to show it. That's what dual axis is, meaning it's very accurately following the sun.
Okay, but to do that is complicated, and you've got to have moving parts, and they're going to wear out and break, dude. So then what do, right? Because, this has to operate for years. So, yeah, what happens when one day that thing stops working?
Yeah, are you always whining like that? That was a good whine. That was great.
I'm used 10 years on the show. We've heard all of the whining. Yeah, we know what it sounds like.
That's a whine I hear sometimes from customers, but mostly that's beautifully scripted on the part of anybody who's installing a fixed rooftop solar. They love trashing what we do. Oh, moving parts and broken, whatever. We just got a track record that shows that it works, right? This is, the design here is really elegant in that it's componentized, right? So there are two motors. There's an elevation motor up and down, azimuth left and right. They're each about $180 and about an hour of labor to replace them. By the way, inverters go out all the time on rooftop solar too, right? Stuff breaks, right? So we've got it down pat. I like to summarize it. I think I share with you, Jesse, Zach. We have one guy who services 1,283 of our trackers in the field. One guy, one Maytag repairman. So that's the amount of maintenance that these things require. It's designed really robustly and carefully to handle what the weather throws at us. And up here in New England, we've got some weather.
So let's talk about sort of how it works. I think that a lot of people, they see a solar panel and they think that magically you glue it to something and that thing now has power. And I think that for people who know how things actually work, they know that there's wires, and people who know more about solar know that there's inverters and probably batteries involved. So what is kind of the way that your system functions?
Sure. Let me see if I can make it like as simple, stupid as possible. The sunshine's generating sunlight. It's coming down in the form of DC power, direct current. It then needs to get translated into AC, right? So that's what the inverter does, and then it's going to go back DC to the battery of the car. So the way we've designed this is the tracker is bringing in the sun. It's going through a battery. So in one of the two gray boxes you can see right there, there is a battery. In this case, it's a 10 kilowatt hour battery that serves as a buffer. And it's not intended to charge cars per se, but it's a buffer. And in the course of the day, the buffer battery goes up and down depending on whether the sun's in or out behind clouds, right? When the buffer battery is high enough charge, then it flips on all of the chargers. And so the sunshine comes through the battery into the cars. It stays charging as long as there's enough sunshine. When the buffer battery drops a bit because the sun's gone behind the clouds, it will turn them off sequentially and eventually all off, and then they go back on as soon as the battery goes back up again. So that's the simple model there.
So this is a little bit different than your typical charger, because most people expect that the charger will work as long as there's power to, whatever building it is. They're going to plug in their car and they're going to get a certain rate of charge unless either the power goes out or their car gets full or they unplug it. But what you're saying is this is truly a solar tracker. So depending on the solar conditions, you'd expect to get more on a sunny day and less on a cloudy day.
That's correct. Yeah. The limiting factor here is Mother Nature. It's sunshine. Hence, we're going to get a lot more in the Southwest than we are in the Northeast. That said, in the Northeast, we're still going to make on average about 120 miles of charge a day, right? Which, over the course of the year translates into about 40,000 miles a year. Divide that by 4 cars, you're at 10,000 miles a year. How many miles a year do we usually drive? All right, so it matches up pretty nicely. Now, we then like to haircut that by 25% because if it's a workplace charging solution, I'm not there on weekends, and I'm probably not there on holidays. So let's call it 7,500 miles, right? At least from our early experience, and we have a lot of data, The average commuter is probably driving 3,500 or so miles a year as part of their workplace, commute. So we're more than doubling, right, the amount of charge that a commuter needs to get to and from work, which is what the employer feels is effectively their duty, right, to provide to their employees. It's, we're trying to help people think about not over-engineering the solution here, right? It's like, hey, since when, right? Since the beginning of time has an employer been a gas station? Never, right? Now suddenly they're being asked to do that. Well, great, let's let them provide that as an amenity, but they don't have to overdo it and provide a whole lot of really expensive grid-tied charging if we can drop one of these in the parking lot and have 4 vehicles get fully charged just sitting there all day.
So let me ask you, I'm the pretend CEO of some company that, Jesse wants to have chargers at, and I don't want to go through the whole nightmare of the grid, whatever. So I call you up. Am I going to be able to save money over doing it the traditional way? If I get a solar tracker, is it going to come out cheaper, more expensive? Like what are the ups and downs of doing it that way?
I think the short answer is what hat you're wearing, right? If I'm wearing the hat of both the employer and the employee who is benefiting from it, right? The all-in cost of this is absolutely less, right? So the employee's got to pay for the charging. Employer has got to put in this really expensive 30, 40, 50 grand, who knows, like, grid-tied charging station. But then there's the cost of the fuel, right, which will rise year over year, probably 3-4% a year in aggregate.
Oh, I was forgetting about that part. So like even at your job, if they had installed the chargers, the electricity is coming from National Grid or whatever, and either your employer would subsidize it or you'd paid for it.
Well, and that was another big problem was both access and cost of the electricity, because there were 2 problems. One was that the employees would get unlimited electricity, which was like, for me, I was like, great, because I was the employee. For the business owner, it's like, okay, it's not that expensive, but it is a cost.
And it's getting more expensive.
And then the second problem was, how do we stop random people from A, blocking the chargers, and B, then they're parked stealing electricity. So then it was like, and when I talked to Tesla was going to give us their level 2 chargers, and they even had the J1772 plugs. Okay, great. So anyone would be able to charge any electric car, but the problem was anyone would be able to charge any electric car. So there was a worry that people would come and charge for free. There was a security question. There was a lot of problems, and Tesla did not solve any of those problems for us.
Well, let me ask you, Rob, did you solve that problem? Like, what if I show up to XYZ Corporation and I'm not allowed to charge there? Can the owner decide that I am not allowed to charge there?
The owner can, yeah. And the model we've set up, it's a clean, simple model. It can be done in a number of ways, but in the near term, the initial folks we've installed for are set up such that all the employees who have access to it have an RFID card, right? That is dedicated to them. So Joe and Susie each have a separate card. Whenever they swipe it, we know it's them. We know how much they're charging, how long they're there, all that. So the data is really tight. It's not open to the public, right? And it's not on any network, so you can't see it. It's not popping up so somebody coming off the highway is coming by to use it, right? And I think what it gets to too is this, you touched on it a couple minutes ago. This is a really important one. It's again, it goes back to the average EV driver's cycle, charge cycle is 10 kilowatt hours. It's nothing, right? It's an hour and a half. So, and yet the car is sitting there all day long. So what are we trying to accomplish here? People don't need, there are these big disconnects of people showing up, plugging into a charging station. They're full after 2 hours. The car's sitting there all day long. Now it's blocking the charging. So the way we've set it up is, given the variability of Mother Nature, people, get a dedicated spot. They park, they plug their, it's kind of like a downtown, office, spot that I've rented for the year, or gym membership, call it what you will. And they plug in every day. Some days they get a little, some days they get an awful lot. In aggregate, they get everything they need, but they remain in that 50 to 80% charge range, which is where EV drivers live, right? We don't let it go to 5%. We don't go to 100 because the manufacturers tell us it's not good for the battery, right? But I'm living in 50 to 80, just simply plugging in every day. And now I'm not watching the sun and is it going to be sunny or not. Even on a cloudy day, I'm getting charged. But it's I'm topping off. I'm constantly topping off. It's no different than this infernal thing. I mean, truly, right? I look for a cord whenever I can, so I don't end up at the 5%, phone anxiety. It's the same thing with the car. So it's a change in thinking. EV drivers understand this. Non-EV drivers don't get it at all. The 99% of us who don't drive an EV are like, well, it's not fast enough. Speed doesn't matter if my car is sitting there all day long. It just doesn't matter, right? But So it's an education challenge.
Now, you guys have been doing this for, you said 14, 15 years. Who are your typical customers? It sounds like they were residential to begin with, and now we're shifting more into commercial.
Yeah, we're probably 90% residential across Vermont, New Hampshire, and northwestern Mass. And people have anywhere from 1 to the biggest one has 19 of these. So it depends on your usage. We've done kind of light commercial. We've done schools. We've done small business, if you will. So this whole world is moving from B2C, which is a very different model, to B2B, which is the enterprise world. So now it's the facilities director and the sustainability person and the COO and the CF. So that's a whole different ball of wax. But that's been the evolution.
How does it typically work when someone at a company or a university, I know you just installed these at some colleges up there, probably a lot of people want this stuff, but who's the decision maker? Like, it's probably not the student environmental club president. So how's the whole chain work?
Yeah, I think I would guarantee you that it's different everywhere you go. I mean, the ownership will lie in different places. In some cases, we've built great relationships with the sustainability director, and they drive it through. In other places, it's been the head of facilities, who's just as you described earlier, Jesse. He's like, "Are you kidding me? You mean you'll just drop it in the parking lot, and I don't have to deal with the digging and the electricians? By the way, no electricians either. Permitting little to none. No excavating, no backfilling, no upgrading of infrastructure, you name it. So the facilities folks tend to be pretty excited about this. And of course, if the stars align, you find the CEO, the head of this or that, and they see the vision, and they're like, "Duh, this makes a world of sense. Let's at least explore this carefully."
Let's look at how it's built, Jesse. This is not like any other tracker or structure really that I've seen. I was expecting this very massive I-beams and stuff like that, but this looks very lightweight. Can you explain how it's able to function? I mean, that's really wide. You're covering almost up to 4 car spaces. How does that work?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because this is really where the IP is, intellectual property in our design. So, to their credit, and this is before my time, but 15 odd years ago, our engineers looked at each other and said, "Wait a minute, we could go the traditional route of holding a big sail up there in the wind, like a truss bridge, if you will, with huge steel I-beams, right? But it's big, it's bulky, it's expensive, heavy. Or let's be inspired by a suspension bridge." And so what they designed was, as you can see, this 6-meter post that runs right through the middle of the array. They've attached 25 pounds of high tension, airplane, heavy duty wiring to it, and suspended the array in perfect alignment, to either end of that pole, thereby removing about 1,200 pounds of steel. So now, instead of huge hydraulic, motors that need to move it, and if they break, good luck getting those fixed. Now it's these two motors that I described earlier, lightweight, a whole lot less expensive, and it's just more nimble looking. It's less Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. It's not heavy duty stuff. So it works well in a residential backyard or in somebody's field. But there's also, I think, there's a kind of modernistic, cool design element in a commercial kind of parking lot. I mean, commercial parking lots are wastelands of pavement, right? This is going to be, we think, a pretty neat enhancement, if you will. And we're not going to have the concern of the nosy neighbor who doesn't want to look at it and it's hurting their home value and blah, blah, blah. Beauty of the eye of the beholder.
I'm going to put my gotcha hat on again, though, because I'm sure people out there are going to be like, "Yeah, but when it's windy and it's going to blow over, man, could you make it very heavy?"
It's a good one. I like the accent too. So in the upper right-hand corner, left-hand corner, one of those corners there is an anemometer. So these are smart machines, right? They're also weather stations. They're capturing wind speed and temperature. There's a business model there. We've got millions of data points. Do you guys need some weather data? And so that when the anemometer senses a gust above, say, 20 knots or so, whatever we set it at, it'll stow itself tabletop flat. Right? And it'll sit that way for 2 hours until it senses a gust, nothing above 20 knots again, and it goes back to tracking. So that's purely to minimize long-term wear and tear. But why be a sail up in the wind when wind's blowing that hard? Usually it's cloudy anyway. We're not making a whole lot of power. Plus, you're still making 60% of your power when you're flat. So it's smart. It's smart in that sense. Yeah.
All right. So we've solved a bunch of different problems, but I think the big question for a lot of people is, what's the price tag? What's the cost? Because at the end of the day,
it's all about money.
Somebody's going to be hit with a bill and they're going to go, oh, actually, we're going to delay this project even further. And then, whoever it is can't get their EV charged at work. So what does it cost?
What's it cost? It's a great question. Oh, you should have hit that right off the bat. I love to talk about it first. So we've gone 2 models, and the first is the creative one. So I'll hit that one first. So rather than just selling these things, we are leasing them. So now instead of a huge capital expenditure and all the delay that comes with that decision, it's a clean lease model. So we're leasing these for $4,000 a year, right? So if I'm a company, a hospital, a school, you got $4,000 a year, and that's going to put 40,000 miles of potential charging into your vehicle here in the Northeast, but more like 60,000 in the Southwest. So 4,000 is a pretty clean model. We've raised the first of a series of funds. The investors, if you will, put the money in, buy the machines. We then just make sure they're leased and serviced and performing.
That amount sounds like the amount that most actual student club presidents probably have in their account. So they probably don't have to ask the CEO or the president.
You can kind of raise that in a bake sale every year or something. Yeah.
Well, and then look, don't forget that, again, this is a 25-year power plant. It's sitting out there in the parking lot making power. That power has value. So now we're leasing it for $4,000 a year. The entity leasing it, the company, the school, the hospital, you name it, can then monetize that any way they choose, right? So, they could go so far as to make it cost neutral, right, to the lessor, if you will, or they could subsidize it. So we see a lot of schools thinking, all right, well, we'll pay $2,000 a year. We'll push $500 to each of the 4 drivers. Boom, that's less than they're paying at home for charging. Everybody wins, right? So instead of the 30, 40, God knows, 50,000 I got to put into, to putting in grid tied. All right. So that's a pretty neat model, right? So that's one way. We also sell these at $50,000 a piece, then take off the $15,000 that is the 30% federal tax credit from solar, right?
Oh, I forgot about that. Wait, so this is available for that.
So this is it's $35,000 as a starting point. That includes not-for-profits because the IRA from a year and a half ago has a direct pay feature. Right, so I don't have to be a tax-paying entity to get the benefit of the tax credit. Right, so now it's just a direct pay. So think 35 really is as the value, and then there's accelerated depreciation if you're a for-profit that would take another $9,000 off. So now maybe think 26. Now, all right, so it's costing me what, $1,000 a year over 25 years? I'll kind of stop there, right? So pretty reasonable, right? What we're seeing, just to further answer the question you asked earlier about competition, the other player out there is doing something that produces half the amount of power for 40% more cost. So we think we got a pretty good value proposition.
And the fact that electricity prices are just going up so fast.
Right. I mean, the other thing is, the sun doesn't send a bill at the end of the year for all the photons it's been blasting into your solar panels, and luckily there's no tax on it yet.
but Rob, you said that you're primarily up in Vermont and New England. I mean, yeah, the sun's even better in other parts of the country. Why aren't you there?
Well, I think this is maybe kind of a typical kind of brass knuckle New Englander kind of mindset. But, as we've been told, hey, if you can make it work up here, you can make it work anywhere. And they're probably right about that, right? There is it's a new product launch kind of mindset, right? I mean, this is just a new product line to a company that's been around for quite some time. But we wanted to keep it close to home as we got the first 10, 100, 200 out the door, right? Let's just be smart. We have no debt. We have no, outside investors. We've been, stayed over our skis over time. Well, 9 out of 10 solar companies went under. So we've been, growing with cash flow and careful. So we approach this launch the same way, to just do it slowly, carefully, make sure that everything's working the way it should. And we tend to be, the opposite of the get the really slick marketing stuff out the door and then figure out the product. We go the other way. So we're going to make sure it does everything it should, and then we're ready to, which it does now, and so we're ready to go tell the story.
Wait. You're a business that actually makes money?
What?
How old-fashioned of you.
I don't want to say lots of money, but I want to say that we're not selling dollar bills for 95 cents. Well, at least not most years.
Okay, so if I was in the mode of wanting to get these for my EV. But now if I put an investor hat on, is there any way for investors watching right now to possibly invest either through a crowdfund or a new funding round that's coming up?
It's a great layup question. Thank you. We, as a matter of fact, are launching the first raise in this company's history is actually in the next couple weeks. So yes, the short answer is we will be going out for a small round to begin to take this more regional and then national, because we need to be in different markets in short order.
So if people watching are interested, what should they reach out to you guys directly? How does that work?
I would go straight to Rob Adams, so radams@solaflect.com. And we could happy to share a prospectus in a direction that we're heading. Yeah, we've already raised the first of a series of $1 million funds to support the lease model, but that's a different kind of annuity cash flow model. This would be an equity raise that would help us get to California and Arizona and places where we know. I mean, California, for example, is really exciting given how crazy the utility rates are. I mean, you can put one of these in California, plug 4 cars into it, and pay less than people pay at home today. I mean, that's crazy, right? So we need to be there. We need to be in lots of places. So we're excited.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I mean, there's certain states, because our country and world is so crazy that we have different locations with different prices of electricity. I mean, Hawaii, for instance, would be like, I'll volunteer to work at that office.
Yes.
I feel like that's a no-brainer, right? Because certain states like California, you said, Hawaii, are just, their electricity rates are so high, this is a complete no-brainer. Now, maybe, another state that has lower electricity prices, it might be a tougher sell, but there's so many states that are already good for you guys. So if I'm in a state other than Vermont and I'm interested in this, are you guys ready for me? Can I call you and get one of these installed?
I think the short answer is we want to be in discussions with as many folks as we can. If we get to a critical mass in a certain place, that'll certainly help move the dial as to where we choose to invest, what are now limited resources, hopefully not before too long, but where we choose to go. So we're excited about dialogues just about everywhere. Yeah.
And Jesse, I think because they're just up in Vermont, just one state away, that we should drive up there with the Cybertruck and charge up and get some of those electrons and check it out, like for ourselves. I think this is just amazing technology.
Vermont's waiting for you. Bring it on. No, we would love to host you up here. Absolutely.
So give me a little bit of background on Solaflect as a company. I think that, you've said that you've been doing this for a while, but obviously you've been doing residential trackers. You're saying 10 to 14 years ago?
Yeah, we installed the first 5 years of our existence, almost 5, were all in research and development. So we got a $2 $1 million grants from DOE as part of the Sunshot program way back in the day to help drive the cost down of solar in general, and that allowed us to spend the time necessary to design this. Originally, the company was founded to do heliostats, and realized early on that was not a viable model for at least what we were intending to do. So we pivoted to putting solar on the tracker, and that's where we ended up. Probably 11 years ago, we installed the first of these trackers, and have since put 1,283 in the ground since then. So it's been about a 20% year-over-year growth rate, all built on cash flow over the course of the last 11 years or so. Yeah.
And then when did the idea for this EV charging come into play, and how long was that kind of research and development?
Yeah, it was about 2 years ago that we had the first really intriguing discussions, the aha moment, if you will, as we saw the debacle unfolding around the gap between the need for EV charging and the infrastructure that's available to do it. And we put the first prototype in our back parking lot right here in Vermont, which you'll see when you visit us, about 18 months ago. So we've been, producing power and charging cars for 18 months there. And then we put the first commercial solar EV charger at Dartmouth College almost seven months ago. So it's still early days, but Dartmouth couldn't be happier. We have 4 super excited people who charge every day, and the data coming out of it is just validating what we've been talking about, which is good.
So Rob, I have a question. There's a lot of IRA money that's been put into charging. I know a lot of states are applying for grants, and it's a complicated process, but basically people are figuring this all out. Is there a way that you could get a grant to help pay for one of these?
There's no doubt. I think this is a phase issue. We've decided phase 1 to go right to the prospective customers in the workplace EV charging space. That's massive. I mean, DOE's expects 15% of charging to happen in the workplace by 2030. It's probably at 5, 4, 3, 2, 1% now. So there's a huge opportunity there. So, we found the most valuable early vetting. So let's go straight to the hospitals and to the schools and to the companies and to the, right. And that's been great. We're getting the feedback that we need. In my experience, I wasn't here when we went through the DOE grant application, but all the rest of these things, you need one or two full-time people whose job it is to chase these things. And yes, so we are going to pursue those. We're just trying to, get some traction in stuff that cycles more quickly. But I think, I know the nature of what we're doing fits right in the power alley for some of these, grants. That said, careful, right? The utilities often have their hands in this stuff, and you get into page 17 and it's got to be grid tied, which is pretty insidious, right? So we're just a round peg, square hole in some cases. But once people have heard the story and they understand, they're like, wow. I was thinking about like what are the big themes interesting to share with you today. And I think that one of the most critical is just simply getting off the grid. We're off the grid. We don't need it. I mean, our dream for years has been to come up with a model that doesn't require all of the shenanigans and the monopoly power that comes with owning a market the way they do. We don't care anymore. It's a lovely feeling. Drop it in the parking lot. By the end of the day, you flip the switch and it's charging cars. Like none of that stuff.
So on that topic, though, this means that the charger runs when the grid is down. So big storm or something rolls through. This is going to be running the next day, or during that day. Then can you like run an extension cord off of, like, is there like a little plug and you could run an extension cord and we could get like some things in the office running? Or, oh my gosh, we didn't realize that Janet kept her medication in the fridge and she won't be able to get it for like another month because of, the healthcare system. So we need to keep that refrigerated. The thing is, to me, emergencies, solar always feels like it's a really good thing to have. So just kind of talk to me about like what is available to the owner of this unit. What can they do to it?
Yeah, I think again I'd go back to like phase 1, phase 2. Think small company focused on what's the number one prize we have to go after right now. We want to put as much power into EVs as possible. I'll tell you, it's fascinating. And these guys have been at it for a while. The guys on the West Coast who are selling a product that's similar but different. I think their primary focus has been emergency preparedness, right? So they've gone to market saying, all right, we've got something that when the grid's down, and guess what? That checks the GSA box, and these federal entities and the military and are saying, all right, well, my mission says I've got to go do that. My board of directors says I must have that. And so it's set up to be able to do that. We can do the same thing.
I mean, I was thinking military-wise, this is exactly what the Army wants right now, because you could drop this in anywhere, and then if you had an electric Abrams tank or something, this takes care of it. Like, wow. Or two of them.
It's gonna be a thirsty Abrams electric tank, but yeah.
That's a lot of power.
Yeah.
But yes, conceptually, Zach, you're spot on. No, but it's coming. And that's also a question of the size of the battery, right? So we put a 10 kilowatt hour battery on this. We'll make it 20 at some point. We're trying to keep the cost down, for the end user as well. The truth is, we're data wonks and we crunched the numbers last summer for 3 months. And the gating factor here is not a battery on the machine, right? Look at the amount of storage in those 4 vehicles right there. That's 400 kilowatt hours of storage. I put a 20 kilowatt hour battery on that? Come on. It's not doing much, right? I mean, a little, but it's not like on a cloudy day, I can charge everybody, right? So these guys on the West Coast have a battery on there, but it feels like a little bit of a disconnect. There's not much there to really accomplish. The gating factor, again, is the sun. It's all Mother Nature, right?
So there's kind of another thought that I have, which is that I'm an EV owner. And so when I'm approaching, my, the company that I might work for and I want charging, there's like, oh, I want EV charging, which is one aspect of it. But a lot of EV owners, coincidentally, are also EV advocates and EV enthusiasts. And one of the big things that they enjoy is kind of the greener aspect of this, which we've been talking a lot of dollars and cents here. And you mentioned, the nice strawberries at at a grocery store that you might pay a premium for when they're in season. But I think that a lot of EV enthusiasts, we hate this argument, this kind of 20 to 30-year-old argument of like, well, these are coal-powered machines and it's all coal and it's dirtier than if you just burned gas. And it's like, that's not true. We already know that that's not true. But it's a public perception problem. And I feel like if you can take a picture of your car underneath a solar panel and say that solar panel is connected to my car and this is not connected to the grid, it's this shut up and I've just proven you wrong. Boom, hammer, shut up. Because I think that so many EV enthusiasts are so sick and tired of these arguments because they come from everywhere for some reason. And the reason is fossil fuel money spent on lobbying and lots and lots of, lots of psyopy sort of public campaigns to try and get people to not like EVs, all because then you stop buying fossil fuels. It's hard to do that, and I feel like this is like a perfect little just where you can go, it's from the sun, and then there's nothing else you can say, it all starts to peter out from there, and then they have to, start going off on other things to be upset about. I mean, I feel like it's just a nice thing for me to be able to point to a company like this and to point to, hopefully, you install 1 million systems. So that way it's like, if half of or all the EVs in this country are charged at work using a Solaflect module, then it's like, then this argument of them being coal-powered completely goes away. Not that it isn't already going away.
Well, and I do want to talk to Rob about what we think the future is going to be with robotaxis. I mean, if our vision of the future takes hold and Tesla goes forward with robotaxis, and if this becomes the defining moment, like when we went from horses to cars, we now go from owned cars to, let's say, fleets of cars, we're going to have all these EVs that need charging, and it just seems like this fits really, really well. The amount of space you're taking up, we passed, I think it was the Stoneham Zoo the other day. They just installed new solar canopies in their parking lot, and they were huge. They took up the whole parking lot. It was a big building thing to do, and I got to imagine you have to be sure that's going to work before you spend that kind of money. Here, if I was a college or a university or whatever, and I want to just try it, I could just try one unit, get some data, and then expand as I need them. And I just feel like that's the answer.
It scales so easily. Oh, you need 4 more cars? Yeah, we'll drop one off. I mean, it really is that clean. Digging? No. Yeah, over there on the corner? Sure, we'll go there. So it's clean. I think, Jesse, your point is just worth a minute on the whole getting entirely off the grid. It's this whole clean energy thing. It's eliminating any risk of greenwashing. Like, no, sunshine, battery, boom, boom, nothing else in the middle. Like, no. So you're right about that. It's really clean. There's an inherent hypocrisy, intentional or not, but I go buy my squeaky clean EV and I plug it into the grid that is at, look, ISO New England, I've studied it, you have too. It's at least 50%, it's not natural gas, it's methane. That's great marketing, by the way. Good show. But, and the rest of it, and this is, again, I'm putting on the economics, hat for just a moment. The rest of it is kind of base load, right? It's nuclear, it's hydro. You can't turn that stuff up. Can't make the rivers run faster. Nuclear is what it is. So as we add all this new demand, this stuff coming into to the system from all these EVs, let alone heat pumps that are going in all over New England, where's it coming from? I can't turn the other stuff up. So it's all coming from gas. So let's, at the margins, which is where all the learning happens, right? I'm filling my squeaky clean EV with gas. Sorry, you just are, right? So this story here, what we're doing allows you to get out of that, right? I have a new story to tell. And you can imagine the sustainability folks are loving that piece of the story. It's like, no, we're actually doing the right thing here, right?
Well, because even if I, call up a solar company and they install solar on my roof, it's going to be grid tied. And so, yes, if you do the math and if you're an intellectual and you're able to think about it and say, my solar panels on my roof are generating more electricity than the electricity that's going in my car, then therefore I'm running off of solar. But there's a nagging part of the back of my brain that goes like, yeah, but there is like, no one's keeping track of the molecules. There's no passport control. This electron says, oh, no, where did you come from? Oh, I came from the coal plant. Oh, okay. Well, no, don't come into my EV. And oh, where did you come from? I came from a solar panel. Oh, that's wonderful. Come on in. There's none of that. This is like one of the only ways that you can actually be sure that like the electrons are solar powered.
It's truly unplugging from fossil fuels. That's simple. The other analogy I've used is, the Connecticut River runs by right out here. If I took a gallon of water and I poured it in the river upstream, and then I take a gallon out downstream, that's what we're talking about with solar on my roof, right? And I don't know which molecules it is. It certainly helps. For sure, I'm adding good things to the system, and bad things don't have to be bought as much. But this takes all the gray away. It's like, oh, no, sunshine, you're it.
Rob, this is so much fun. I would love to have you back, especially with our investor club. So after this airs, it'd be great if you're available to talk to our investors and answer questions, especially with your upcoming round. So yeah, let us know if that might be a possibility.
No, happy to. Great to talk to you guys. Really enjoyed the chance to, just to talk about doing as much good as quickly as possible, which gosh knows we all need. There's a crisis to be tackled.
Awesome. Rob, we'll let you get back to work installing more of these awesome inventions out in the parking lots in the world. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks, Jesse. Appreciate it.